Dumelang Make ke le lemoge lotlhe ke le itumelle ka Setswana se se tlwaetseng ke legolodike ka tiro e le e dirang mo diemong tse di thata mme le e dira ka boineelo jo le ka bokgona. And so I must sincerely acknowledge the contribution of each and every one of you. I recognize you all. I see many familiar faces in this room, people I have worked with, engaged with, quarreled with, on occasion fought with, and I acknowledge everyone warmly. I must express a reverent attachment to those with whom I have worked, and I must single out for special mention Professor Bojosi Otlhogile, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. And he is in default because having raised me, he ought to have come to check on me. Because if I stumble and fall, he will carry a substantial part of the blame. He is the person who, when he was my head of department, invited me to his office when I was a young, disrespectful lecturer, admonished me for my frequent appearances in the courts, indicated to me that at the end of the year he would be assessing me for something called crossing the bar at UB, and that if I continued the way I was going, I would not be able to cross the bar. In that brief engagement, I asked him what I needed to do to cross the bar. He told me I needed to have at least a chapter in a book or conference proceedings published, or something he thought was highly unlikely, a journal article. And so, disrespectful lecturer that I was, I told him I had no difficulty producing a journal article at my pleasure and election, and that he should remind me about 3 months before the assessment. And I banged the door and left his office. Luckily for me, at the time that I was engaging with him, it turned out, and I wasn't paying much attention, that I had a chapter in some book, in fact two. One co-authored with the late Justice Michael Motobi on the universality of human rights, of which I was the lead author, and the other on the right to development. And so I realized I had more than met the requirements. But I hurriedly put together a journal article which I dispatched and which was accepted for publication in the Criminal Law Forum, an international refereed journal. And I continued with my life. And so when the assessment time came, the criteria were, I think there was satisfactory or good. It was good, satisfactory, very good, excellent. And on what I've just told you, I qualified to be assessed excellent or better than excellent. So he, as the head of department, completed this form and assessed and put very good. I saw it and I got very angry. Charged at him in his office, threw the documents in his face, and asked him what was wrong with him, whether he had a problem with me, and he said, no, I don't have any problem with you, but you have a problem. I said to him, have I not more than met the requirements? He said, yes, you have. Why did you not put excellent? And he now counseled me, said, your problem is with what you've produced, you are operating probably at 10% of your capability. You should be giving me at least 10 journal articles every year. Don't compete against anybody else. Compete against yourself. And I listened to him because I also had to sign. And when I finished with him, I realized that even the very good was extremely generous. And so he left an impression. I did not change, though. I continued being truant, going to court. So thank you very much, Professor Otlhogile, for exacting of me the highest standards in accordance with what you thought I was capable of. So thank you very much to all of you. I propose to proceed in 5 measured steps. In step 1, I will make remarks of a prefatory nature to frame and prefigure the reflections that I will imminently table before you. My aim today is to provoke, to dazzle, and to puzzle. Next, I will describe with candor and honesty where I think we are. And I will hazard a few thoughts on how we got here. That's the second step. In step 3, I foreshadow the future and present a faint charcoal outline of where we ought to be, and to render an approximation of what, in my humble view, might get us where we ought to be. In the penultimate step, step 4, I offer a delicious foretaste of the proximate actions that should be undertaken to devise a coherent approach to overcome some of our present challenges. And in the ultimate instance, step 5, I shall return to shore and bring my wandering bark back to port at last, and conclude with an exhortation, a solemn plea and prayer, something of a call to action. Let me locate myself in the discourse. I stand before you today as but a vector of a vision, bold and precise, representing the collective insight and wisdom of a coalition called Umbrella for Democratic Change. I call your attention to this fact in order to suggest to you that the present regime is a blend of variegated perspectives, a polyphony in the language of poetry, literature, and literary criticism. I represent, therefore, many voices and viewpoints, yours included. It is a plurality, and I am but an embodiment of that fusion and synthesis. It involves all of us in equal measure. None has more claim to the vision, to the synthesis, than the other. We are together in it. This vision is not, however, self-executing. It requires agency, institutional agents as well as individuals. State-owned enterprises and parastatals form part of the repertory of agents and institutions that must help realize this vision. You must help translate this vision into tangible benefits for the country and its people. We must never lose sight of the central and guiding concern, the economic growth of the country and the well-being of Botswana. How do we position and deploy each SOE to be of maximum value to the people? Now is the time for deep reflection and reappraisal. Now is the time for solemn intensity. The entities you represent here are all creatures of statute. They are governed or controlled by legislation. They each have a mandate and serve a purpose. Properly understood, what is this purpose? What are the animating interests behind the establishment of each of these entities? Has your entity lived up to its billing? What justifies its continued existence? These questions require honest answers, not fudges and evasions. Are there overlapping mandates or just zones of intersection? What is the degree of overlap, if any exists at all? In the face of a stagnant economy of little to no growth, an economy that is undiversified, of insufficient job creation, negative net exports, staggering wealth and income inequality, endemic poverty, and other challenges, we must seek an approach that fosters global competitiveness and promotes a business environment that is flexible and adaptive, powered by technology, innovation, and creativity. For its part, government must do away with the current overbearing, rigid, archaic, and overly restrictive approach. Botswana shall rise, and now is the time. But I must warn and caution. The rise of this country is neither inevitable in its occurrence nor foreordained in its content. It requires us, all of us. It requires imagination. Yes, imagination. My teacher and icon defines imagination as that aspect of the mind that is neither modular nor formulaic, that has power to recombine everything with everything else, that advances in insight by defying its own methods and presuppositions, and that subsumes everything actual under a penumbra of adjacent possibilities. Imagination. It enjoins us to examine our circumstances and present realities, to engage in a critical self-evaluation, and produce for ourselves Antonio Gramsci's critical self-inventory. We must come to terms with the good, the bad, and the ugly in our current institutional setup. We must engage in rigorous analysis. Our situation demands intense, serious examination, not the crude distortions that pass for analysis out there in the public domain, where the lethally ignorant and eminently unqualified masquerade as experts and analysts, and acres of newspaper space are littered with their drivel. Our circumstances require that real analysts and experts step up. Imagination to the rescue. A series of institutional innovations is required. We shall undertake a reorganization of many of our institutions. We shall do so not recklessly or haphazardly. We will not base our actions and interventions on conjecture and anecdotal evidence. We will not pander to popular sentiment. We will not follow the route of political expediency. To undo and repair damage done to our institutions, our psyche, and the body politic over decades cannot be accomplished in an instant. It requires sustained and principled effort. We must focus on what is right, not what is easy and convenient. We shall not fall for scattershot approaches. True analysis does not infer causation from correlation, because there may be alternative causal variables that have not been considered. Statisticians and scientists call it the omitted variable bias. We must do rigorous analysis. That was by way of a prolegomena. Step 2. Where are we? Brutal honesty. Most of our SOEs have underperformed. They have been and continue to be a drain on the fiscus and a burden on government. This state of affairs is unacceptable and unsustainable. Many SOEs are plagued by governance issues. Even the best performing have contented themselves with normalized mediocrity and ordinariness. The reasons for this include the repulsive resurgence over the last 2 decades of appointments not based on merit and cutting-edge competence, but on filiation and affiliation. This has been a problem. And that is why we must now focus on merit in our appointments. Demonstrable track records of cutting-edge performance and excellence. Step 3. Where ought we to be? We need to have, for our SOEs and parastatals, reviewed, refined, and perhaps even enhanced mandates. Our SOEs ought to be fully self-financing and profitable. They ought to grow into global players and expand into international markets. Those with substantial overlaps in mandate ought to be rationalized and merged. And all ought to have deployed technology and attained maximum levels of efficiency, productivity, and profitability. Step 4. Government has begun a comprehensive expert-led process to develop in the next 12 weeks a national transformation program, NTP, to replace the primeval National Development Plan, NDP. This is a cognizable shift in approach and strategic thrust. Whereas the NDP was merely aspirational and vision-based, the NTP is implementation-based and focused on specific actions by various ministries and agencies, including SOEs and parastatals. Whereas NDP was a general roadmap of government's long-term commitment to national development, NTP enjoins the active participation of specified government entities with clear responsibilities and defined assignments. Whereas NDP posited ambitious targets for overall economic, social, and cultural development, NTP stipulates specific targets that are measurable and quantifiable, KPIs, with clear metrics of assessment and lines of accountability. Whereas NDP paints only in broad strokes and lacks specificity in regard to concrete steps and proximate actions towards implementation, NTP prioritizes transparent, see-through processes and communication for stakeholder engagement to update on progress and challenges. NDP was a government document prepared by government almost exclusively for itself. The National Transformation Program is a nationwide document involving yourselves and the private sector, so that when in 12 weeks that document is settled, it will have our collective input. It will indeed be a polyphony, a fusion and synthesis representing the very best of our country and society. The critical next step in this process is that a strategic workshop will be held to collect and record insights at all levels, to develop and refine strategic priorities and obtain full buy-in from, amongst others, yourselves. It will bring about identification of and coalescence around a true north. We must get our bearings right. It will determine immediate and long-term projects. It will identify socio-economic growth drivers. It will also have capacitation, continuing training and learning, which will and must include unlearning some of the habits and practices which we have routinized, stylized, and now become a defining feature of how we operate. We must unlearn some of those. So it will be a process of training, learning, and unlearning. One of the things that we will see is the establishment or strengthening of a project delivery unit in the office of the President, which institutionalizes rigorous monitoring and evaluation and provides early detection of problems and deployment of necessary intervention. It will ensure the achievement of targets within set times and budgets. It will also lead in the mobilization of resources to fund the projects, or many of them at any rate. And I conclude now. Words have been spoken, theories propounded, examples are being enacted as we prepare to transform lives and livelihoods. We are all called upon to shed our implicit predilections, our tacit assumptions and presuppositions. We must seize this moment to locate ourselves in a narrative bigger and grander than ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our chance to overcome the egocentric predicament that makes things about us. And we must become inspired champions of change. And at the end, once again, imagination, imagination to the rescue. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the privilege of your company here today and the pleasure of your kind attention. Thank you.